I'm Hugh, joined by Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Hugh. It's good to be back on with you.
Coming up after you is Jim Banks, who declared he is running for Senate today to replace the retiring Mike Braun. There may be other Republicans. I'm just curious what your advice is to anyone getting into a Senate race for the first time, especially since you went from the House to the Senate like Jim Banks is going to try and do.
Well, I'm very pleased that Jim is running for Senate. I've endorsed him already. I've been urging him to run for this race as soon as I learned that my friend and colleague Mike Braun would be running for governor. I think Jim needs to take statewide in Indiana what he's done for Northeast Indiana, which is standing up for strong national defense and the men and women in law enforcement, for cultural sanity, and for fiscal soundness. That's what Hoosiers elected him to do 8 years ago when I first met him in Indiana, and that's what I think they're going to do this election as well. And I'm confident that he's going to run a great campaign, have a big victory, and be a great addition to the United States Senate.
Like you, he is supported by a wonderful spouse. Like you, he has small children. So like you know it's a pain in the neck to campaign and also be a good dad and husband. But you get it done. You get it done. But it really takes a lot of small donors early. I was wondering if you were going to volunteer that. Now I'm going to go back to it. Banks for Senate, FOR, banks4senate.com. How much do small donors matter early in a campaign, Senator Cotton?
Well, they're very helpful, Hugh, especially those that come from the Hoosier State itself. Obviously, if someone's got enough faith into you to give some of their hard-earned money, they're probably going to be willing to put up a yard sign or a bumper sticker or make some phone calls for you. I'm confident that Jim is going to have a widespread base of support across the state of Indiana, whether it's small donors or activists or just regular Republican primary voters who may be busy with their own family and their own job and their own church, but are going to show up in a primary 16 months from now to vote for Jim Banks. And as you point out, Jim and Amanda are younger. They're in their 40s, like Anna and me. They've got young kids. And I think it's a good thing for the Senate to add to our 40-something caucus. You know, we just added people like Katie Britt and J.D. Vance. I have a lot of great friends in the Senate who have been around for 30 and 40 years and are now in their 70s and 80s. But I think it adds something to the Senate. It'll be good for the Hoosier State to have someone in the Senate in his 40s who understand what it's like to raise small children in today's America, not small children in the 70s and the 80s, as so many of my colleagues did.
Now, I want to switch to another friend of yours, Mike Pompeo. I've read his book, Never Give an Inch, and I'm going to interview him tomorrow, but it's embargoed until next week, so I can't tell you anything in here. But you're in here a lot. I'm curious if you've had a chance to read it yet.
I haven't read it yet, no. We reminisced on occasion about some of the episodes in the book, but I'm looking forward to reading it. I think it's an important contribution to Americans' understanding about what happened during the Trump administration from someone who was there from day one to the very final day, and that was the case of very few people in the Trump administration, and also shares Mike's very important perspective about the threats and the challenges we face from around the world. So I'd encourage everyone to go out and buy a copy of Never Give an Inch and maybe give it to those people in your life who care about those matters as well.
No, I'm not saying it's in the book, but I know that you and Secretary Pompeo, when you were in Congress, in the House, made a trip to Geneva and discovered that there were secret protocols to the Iranian deal. Do you think that maybe in the Biden documents there's something about Iran?
Actually, it was a trip to Vienna, Hugh. And
Vienna, that's it.
I was surprised as anyone else. We didn't go there trying to dig it up. They revealed it to us, though, and it became a source of major controversy. It showed the duplicity with which the Obama-Biden team had approached negotiations with Iran. I don't know what are in the Biden documents, Hugh. I mean, they could be about Iran and China and Russia, maybe things that Joe Biden wanted to write about in his memoirs and inappropriately took classified papers. Maybe it's things related to Hunter Biden's international grifting that he wanted to try to conceal from posterity. That's one reason it's so important that we have a full assessment of what was in those papers, that at a minimum, the intelligence committees in the House and the Senate be briefed on the contents of those papers, and we get a lot more transparency than we've had from the Biden White House thus far, which, of course, concealed this when it was first discovered just days before the midterm in a transparent effort to avoid political consequences in that election, and who apparently continue to have their private attorney searching through these papers as opposed to the FBI agents who raided Mar-a-Lago when Donald Trump was in a similar situation.
Yeah, I understand. Well, I don't understand a lot. I'm going to play a clip. Brett Baer had Mara Liasson and Harold Ford Jr. and myself on last night. We spent most of the panel talking about GarageGate, and my cut number 7 is my second hit on this. I want your reaction to this because I don't know what the origin story is, but I brought it up last night. Can we play Senator Cotton cut 7, please?
Last word on this. I want to turn topics.
We need to know the precipitating event, Brett. What is there a grand jury that's asking for these documents? Why did the Penn Biden Center begin the search? Why were lawyers involved? Normally, when you're moving documents, it's not the stuff that lawyers do because they cost too much money. Did the grand jury put in a document request? There is a grand jury investigating Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden's attorney has admitted to that publicly. I'd like to know the events before November 4, and I hope the Republicans dig deep into the precipitating events for these searches and why lawyers for the president are present looking for the documents without security classifications, but Donald Trump's home had to be raided by the FBI. I also want to contrast that, Senator Cotton, with Secretary Clinton, also a presidential candidate. When her server was seized, it went to her lawyers and they deleted half the emails. And I see the stream is frozen. But tell me, why do you think there are two different approaches? Is this just naked politics?
Well, I think, Hugh, that's pretty obviously the reason is that Donald Trump has an R after his name, Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden have D's after their names. Again, it's hard to generalize about these things unless you know the actual content and of these documents and the reasons they were removed. It is apparently a very common fact that when presidents and vice presidents leave office, that some of these documents can find their way inadvertently into boxes. It may have happened with Joe Biden. It may have happened with Donald Trump. It happened with presidents before them. Rarely are those something of grave concern. It's not like, for instance, a government employee or contractor spiriting documents out of a classified facility and sharing them with our adversaries or sharing them with the media. But we have to know the circumstances about these documents. Now, to make a final judgment, I will say this about Hillary Clinton. What she did is much worse than what either, in my opinion, than what Joe Biden or Donald Trump has been alleged to do. She was using a server to conduct active business. Server that could have easily been penetrated.
Oh, it was surely penetrated.
Intelligence services.
It was surely
Donald Trump and
penetrated.
Joe Biden, whatever you say about their document retention and handling practices, these were documents that were dated by the time they arrived at either Mar-a-Lago or arrived at Joe Biden's garage or his office, and they were in hard copies. So they would require physical access. Physical access, I would say, which is much harder at Mar-a-Lago with all of its security cameras and security details from the Secret Service, and it was at Joe Biden's garage. But both of those pale in comparison to Hillary Clinton's malfeasance in setting up a private server while she was the sitting Secretary of State to conduct official government business.
All right, Senator, I want to move to the presidential campaign of 2024 because you are not a member of it. You might be the only Republican not running for president. President Trump gave a interview to David Brody yesterday, the Water Cooler podcast. I just want to play a cut number 4 for our audience. Get your reaction to this.
Those rallies were unbelievable, and he ended up beating Gillum. And most people thought he couldn't do that, but I thought he could. So I got him elected, pure and simple. He would have never, if I said I wasn't going to endorse you, and I was close, there was no reason to go wild about endorsing him. So, now I hear he might want to run against me, so we'll handle that the way I handle things.
Tom Cotton, what does that mean, the way I handle things?
I don't know. I missed who he was talking about at the beginning.
Ron DeSantis.
Oh, well, Hugh, I decided not to take the plunge myself into the presidential campaign, so I'm going to decline to take the plunge into presidential punditry.
Oh, come on. Oh, dear.
We have a lot. I think we're going to have multiple candidates, almost all of whom I know personally and respect and admire for their work. And I wish them all well and look forward to supporting our nominee in about a year and a half and making sure that we defeat Joe Biden or whoever else the Democrats put forward.
I have one more comment for you. The president yesterday was at Al Sharpton's National Action Network. Cut number 14, he's talking about weapons, about which you as an Army veteran know a little bit about. Cut number 11, please.
And ban the number of bullets that go in a magazine. There's no need for any of that. I love my right-wing friends who talk about the tree of liberty is water with the blood of patriots. If you need to work about taking on the federal government, you need some F-15s. You don't need an AR-15. I'm serious. Think about it.
He's serious. Think about it, Senator Cotton. It's like he was praying golden oldies yesterday. What do you make of that comment?
Yeah, Hugh, it's an incendiary and inappropriate comment about people who simply want to own firearms, whether it's for the sake of hunting or shooting in sports events or just collecting or to protect their own families. I mean, that's the heart of the Second Amendment. It's about protecting. It's not hunting. It's not sportsmanship. It's about protecting yourself and your family and their liberty. And as we see too often in America's streets today, the bad guys have weapons that have large capacity magazines. And if you're challenged by one of those in your home or in your backyard, you'd like to have the same capacity. Or if you're a military veteran who can put together and employ an M4 or its civilian equivalent, the AR-15, when you wake up in the middle of the night in the dark because you did it a million times you're in the military and you're more comfortable with that weapon than you are with any other weapon, then why should a law-abiding citizen not be able to own that weapon? It is a insight, though, into how the Democrats think about your Second Amendment rights and why they ought not be given any power to regulate them.
Amen. Amen. Last Biden quote from yesterday, because it goes to something we talked about, the 87,000 IRS agents. Cut number 9.
Because I was disappointed to see the very first bill that the House Republicans, and Nancy, you probably rolling over when you saw it, are bringing to the floor that would help the wealthy people and big corporations cheat on their taxes at the expense of ordinary middle-class taxpayers. You know, all these new IRS agents we have is because they fired a lot of them and a lot of retiring. And guess what? Who needs serious agents to know what they're doing and not doing? The billionaires, the multi-millionaires.
Senator Cotton, that's the most absurd thing I've heard, but I want your reaction to that.
Dude, the reason the Democrats hired an army of 87,000 new IRS agents is to harass middle-class Americans and especially small business owners. Multimillionaires like Joe Biden himself can afford fancy lawyers and accountants to minimize their tax burden. But small business owners, you know, whether it's a dry cleaner or a small merchant or a plumber, they're working hard all day long at their business, trying to generate the revenue to pay the salaries and have a little bit of profit at the end of the year. They don't have the money and the ability to hire fancy lawyers and accountants like Joe Biden does. That's why the House Republicans took a stand against these 87,000 IRS agents, and we're going to try to do the same in the Senate.
Tom Cotton, always a pleasure to talk to you, Senator. Be well, and I'm interested that you've already endorsed my next guest, Jim Banks. We'll talk about that when Congressman Banks joins me next on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Thank you, Senator Cotton.